Kotozakura's hands are down. Tachi-ai. Hoshoryu's going for the neck. Defensive sumo by Kotozakura. Hoshoryu's going for the toss. Grabs him at the belt. Tries to spin him around, but Kotozakura gets him down. Down goes Hoshoryu, and up goes Kotozakura's Yokozuna bid.
Let's start the show. New to sumo, here we go.
Congratulations to Kotozakura on his first ever yusho, and perhaps as importantly, his first shot at becoming the next Yokozuna.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to get too carried away because I feel like every time someone wins a yusho, we're talking about them being the next Yokozuna, and then usually they don't become the next Yokozuna. We said the same about Takakeisho a year ago. We said it about Kirishima, who has fallen quite a bit since then. And we said it about Onosato maybe a little bit too soon. Although I think for Onosato and Kotozakura, it definitely seems more so like a question of when, not if. But right now, it definitely seems like it could be when. That was a really, really impressive performance by Kotozakura to go 14-1 in the competition. Incredible.
Yeah, it was probably the best performance by any sumo wrestler, certainly this year. I would argue it is the best performance by anyone since Terunofuji's last 14-1 tournament, which granted didn't go extremely well for Terunofuji the next one over, but yeah, there is a lot to be excited about with Kotozakura, and honestly, it feels like he's finally gotten the monkey off of his back. After a handful of second place finishes, now that he's won his first, he has now proven that he physically can win that championship, something that a bunch of other guys that have reached this level never did. So, there is every reason to believe that he can just keep climbing and maybe even obtain his rope as early as March, January, February, sometime later next year. Everything's on the table for him now.
Yeah, I think it's so important, your point about having finally won one and getting that off his back. I really feel like in the world of sports generally, that's just so important to have won. They talk about it all the time in different American sports, that just getting that done and knowing that you are a person who's done it and who's been there at the summit. I feel like it makes it a lot easier the next time around. So now we're really looking at a very impressive pool of Ozeki. And obviously we can't talk about Kotozakura without mentioning who he was up against until the final moments of the tournament, and that was Hoshoryu.
Yeah, and what's crazier is that were it not for a loss to Abi that most people believe should have been a restart at the very least, it's very possible that we're looking at a playoff between the two of them, because he would have been undefeated up until that final day. But ultimately, Kotozakura, with the defensive sumo that we've just learned to respect so much, it served him well, and Kotozakura is the winner. But just because Hoshoryu was the runner-up doesn't mean that he's not on a rope run. I believe there is a very clear path for him now to him earning a Yokozuna rope as early as January of next year. Because with 13 wins, if he wins 13, certainly 14, and doesn't win a title, he can still get it. It's happened before where you can get those two consecutive Junyusho and get the Yokozuna rope. We have seen it happen before. Do you think that's something that Hoshoryu really is looking forward to?
I mean, I think it's just as likely that the next tournament ends with a new Yokozuna as not. I think that between the two who are really on the table here, Hoshoryu and Kotozakura, they are both so strong, and we have seen them in moments where they seem like they are the next biggest thing. I don't see why this couldn't be that moment. I think we got a little sidetracked. There's some side quests with Takerufuji and Onosato over this past year. We took a little detour with Kirishima and Takakeisho.
Yeah.
Thank you. But I feel like these two really, they have everything that you need in a way from a Yokozuna. And specifically, Hoshoryu, I feel like we saw a level of performance from him in this tournament that everyone's been clamoring for, that we all knew he was capable of, but the way he was throwing people around in this particular tournament, I found just mind-blowing. When him and Kotozakura were both undefeated and, going pretty far into the tournament already, almost a week in, I just remembered looking at Hoshoryu's wins and thinking, he is like on another planet from the guys that he's up against. And that's what you say usually about a Yokozuna.
Yeah, I'm looking at his methods of winning this past tournament. His 13 wins came by at least a half dozen different community, different styles of winning. He was beating guys by just a simple force out. He was beating guys by lifting them out like he did with Kirishima. I mean, just look at that list. That is a very impressive list of different ways to beat different opponents in a single tournament, and it may be representative of what he's capable of always, not just in this tournament. And it is certainly what I am looking forward to seeing a lot more of in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't want to spend too long, belaboring the point about Hoshoryu because obviously it was Kotozakura who won. But I just want to say that, considering it came down to the final day where the winner of that last match was going to be the winner of the yusho, it's definitely worth mentioning that they were both really, really close in that one, and it was an exciting one to watch. And then I guess the next person we have to mention, since we're talking about the Ozeki, is Onosato.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the past year of Ozeki promotions between Hoshoryu, Kirishima, and Kotozakura have all shown that the difference in competition from simply a Sekiwake to an Ozeki is very impactful. Each of the last four guys to get promoted have been at least several wins lower than they were in the tournament before. So the fact that Onosato, like I will admit, I picked Onosato in my Kachi clash because I kind of thought that he would get away from that trend, buck the trend of guys struggling after reaching Ozeki. But no, he's just like any other Ozeki trying to, find his sumo at this really, really high level. And hey, to come out with 9 wins as a first time Ozeki, with this being only his second year of pro sumo, there is nothing to be worried about with him. I would not be surprised if he had all double digit tournaments in 2025.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the record of who Onosato is losing to, it's people that he has had no trouble beating in the past. And if you look at the people that he's beating, it's the people he's beating comfortably. So really, I think looking at the head-to-head record sometimes is a good way of telling what a person's problem is. And it seems pretty clear that he can beat Hoshoryu, he can beat Kotozakura, he can beat Wakataka. Sorry, he can't beat Wakataka Kage just yet. I take that one back.
Well, he'll certainly get his chance a lot more times this coming year, I have a sense.
Yes, most definitely. And, we can spend more time talking about WTK in just a second. But yeah, just to finish that point, I think Onosato, he's going to be fine. These are guys that he lost to that he's beaten before, and he's going to beat them again. And I still think that he's got a very, very bright future. We made our video where we said he could be the next Yokozuna. It's still possible. If Onosato wins the next tournament, suddenly now he's the guy on the rope run.
Exactly. Like that, and that honestly is Onosato is the one man that Kotozakura and Hoshoryu should be very fearful of in January because he is the one who seems the most likely to disrupt their respective rope runs. It is going to be a brand new year. He's got a full year of sumo under his belt at this very high level. Like, nobody should be taking this young man lightly this coming year.
And so now that we've talked about the Ozeki, we can kind of go a little bit quicker through some of the other big names in the tournament. And specifically staying in the Sanyaku ranks, we had Kirishima, who, again, with a really shocking, disappointing performance. A lot of people were saying after his performance in the last Basho that he could be starting to climb his way back up, potentially even be Ozeki again, which it seemed like he was always that was where he belonged after having 12 wins in the last one, and then to lose so many matches against rank and filers. It's starting to feel like the real Kirishima might be the one who's hanging in and around the low Sanyaku and the high M's and not the Ozeki one. I don't know what to make of it.
I mean, it largely stems from, the neck injury that hindered him in March and then kept him out of most of May, and he fell just shy of reclaiming his Ozeki status in July. But I think that, the problem with injuries, particularly neck injuries, is that they affect you as much psychologically, maybe more than physically, because it is very possible. I'm not saying that this is a sure thing. We'll never be able to get inside his head, but it's very possible that he is at this sort of crossroads where his performance is going to be very much a coin flip in the way that a lot of other guys who used to be in the Sanyaku and are now a little bit lower are. It's going to be just a never ending cycle of will he, won't he? He may have 12 wins this tournament, 8 the next, 4 the next, and then it just keeps cycling and cycling all the while he's in the Sanyaku, then he's out of the Sanyaku. We see it with so many guys these days, guys like Shodai, who we'll get to soon, guys like Wakamoto Haru, guys like Daisho. The thing that sucks is that literally a year ago, it looked like he was on the fast track to Yokozuna. Both of our Ozeki that won tournaments in 2023, one is out of the Sanyaku and the other is now retired. That is why every single tournament matters, because one single injury can derail not just your Yokozuna run or your Ozeki run, but your entire career. And I hope that he proves me wrong in 2025, but I'm very concerned that the best Kirishima we're ever going to see, we already saw in 2023.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. And yeah, I'm always rooting for guys like that, guys who have been at the top but not quite, the peak of their career, the peak of their potential, I should say. You really root for those guys to like recapture that at some point before their careers are over. A guy like Kirishima, who seemed like a Yokozuna, certainly like a potential Yokozuna, would love to see him make it there someday, but obviously, like that's just not the Kirishima we've seen for a while. Continuing on with the Sanyaku, of course, there's Daisho, who's been a very regular member of the Sanyaku for a while now. He though had a pretty weak tournament, only an 8-7 record, but hey, he stayed up.
Yeah, I mean, that's, we discussed this before the tournament, that Daisho probably has the highest floor of anyone in the lower Sanyaku. He is a guy that, barring an injury, is probably a very safe 8 to 9 win guy, particularly at Sekiwake. And if he had been at Komusubi, maybe he would have been able to sneak an extra win or two in. But, he's not young by any means. I mean, he's in his early 30s, but he's been very fortunate to be, pretty injury safe for the better part of 2 years. So I think the Daisho that we're seeing now is about as good as we're gonna get. I mean, three straight 8-7 records is a pretty strong reflection that, yeah, this is where he belongs.
Yeah,
right
you know what you're gonna get. It's and then talking about floors, Shodai comes up and he's going right back down, a 4-11 record coming back up to Komusubi.
Yeah, I mean, we started following Sumo like pretty much right after his fall from the Ozeki rank, so you and I never really got to experience, the Shodai that many people saw as like the next, potential Japanese Yokozuna, like they had hoped Takakeisha would be. But Shodai is just a roller coaster at this point. He's I think he's still relatively young. Isn't he like 30 or something?
33.
Oh, 33. Okay. So he's definitely got way more sumo behind him than in front of him. But he's a guy that, is probably unlikely to get many more winning records from the Sanyaku ranks, for the remainder of his career.
Yep. And then last in the Sanyaku rank, that it's worth mentioning Wakamoto Haru with a 10-5 record, very solid and pretty much, what we know he's absolutely capable of in this position. Lately, the question has really been injury. And but pretty much when he's competing and when he's at his best, he can stick around in the Sanyaku like anyone else.
Yeah, I mean he's got his winning record from the Komusubi, and with Kirishima, set to drop down, I'm fairly confident that Wakamoto Haru is going to reclaim the spot he had in Sekiwake this time a little over a year ago, and I think that's where he belongs. I don't really think that he's Ozeki material just yet because I don't think he's ever won 12 from. I don't even know if he's ever won 11 from the rank of Sekiwake. And if you can't win at least 11, you're never going to reach the rank of Ozeki from there. So he's certainly someone to keep an eye on if he can improve a little bit, but is also in his early 30s, and we might also be kind of seeing the best that he's capable of from this particular rank.
And it's a pretty great best.
Oh yeah, I mean, hey, if you can just consistently win win 10 from the lower Sanyaku, like you're gonna make a ton of money for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And just love to see those guys who can just hold a rank. That's always kind of comforting. Daisho Wakamoto Haru, who for the most part, Wakamoto Haru, who's safely been in and around that area for a while now. It's good to see. And then speaking of those guys who are kind of in and around the Sanyaku, a couple people we should be mentioning now. Wakataka Kage, who's finally back up in the area, and he's going to be in Sanyaku for sure with a 10-5 record from Maegashira 2. Really great performance from him.
Yeah, his comeback is certainly the comeback of the year. I mean, I'd say only Enho, would match him in terms of the energy of reaching this level again. But, for him to just zoom straight back up, like no setbacks whatsoever over the past year as he's recovered. Like we look at it, he won, two lower division yushos, nothing to sneeze about, and he was a runner-up back in September. So, maybe now that he is up in the Sanyaku, he can start an Ozeki run. He suffered his injury, a little bit before he could really start uh getting like a bunch of double digit wins up there consistently. Only spent about a year and change in Sekiwake before his injury, so he's certainly someone that we'll have an eye on for a possible Ozeki run next year. And for him to come back the way he did from that big knee injury is really impressive. Happy for him.
It's been exciting to watch him, definitely. One of those guys you're very happy to see just back. Guys who, are too young to be having career-ending injuries. It's really nice to see them come back up and return to their best performance. I mean, to be back up here is great. And then another just important mention is Abi, who's going to be back in the Sanyaku for sure with an 11-4 record. Really strong.
Yeah, Abi, man, what a tournament he had. Like he has this knack for just being like the Lord of Chaos sometimes. It's like every time you expect him to be good, he struggles, and every time you expect absolutely nothing from him, he winds up being the only guy the only guy outside of the Sanyaku to beat Hoshoryu and beat a bunch of other guys nobody thought he'd beat. So he's just the perpetual wild card, and I'm gonna make sure to pick against him in Kachi Clash next time.
Yeah, no, he's definitely. There was a poll that was done on the Sumo subreddit, I believe, and they said that he was by far the most hated sumo wrestler by at least the people who participated in that subreddit. And
Well, I know why. It's because for a guy his big, he does the henka more often than someone his size should be doing. You're not going to see it on the Kimarite, but he either if he doesn't henka, he also has this nasty habit of getting off the line a little early, but not so early that the referee will always call for a reset. That's how he beat Hoshoryu, to the frustration of many. So, we've certainly we know that Abi is capable of winning a championship. He's done it before, and nobody can ever take that away from him. But it's easy to understand why somebody who, despite winning as much as he had, still has to resort to some dirtier tactics It's easy to understand why they're so hated.
Quickly to run through a couple other great performances in the tournaments, we
Yeah,
had
sure. Takanosho, the Maegashira 6, second time in three tournaments that he had double-digit wins, both from the same spot. So I think he will probably not like that he's going to be up at Maegashira 1 next tournament, but
yeah.
hey, that's your punishment for performing so well. So,
Yeah.
good luck, Takanosho.
Of course, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ends up kind of yo-yoing like an Atami Fuji, who has now had an 8-7 or 7-8 in his last five straight tournaments because he just straight up belongs exactly where he is at M2, M1, M3.
Yeah.
No higher, no lower, and I could see the very same for Takanosho, but he's about to land in that spot where he's comfortable.
Tommy Fuji is that guy that you're always so disappointed by. There's always several losses that he suffers that are so disappointing, but there's always like several wins that just absolutely stun you. Like usually he's good for, a couple of the Sanyaku upsets, and he had them this time. He beat Daisho straight up to break a tie with him, but he lost to all the Ozaki, lost to, he suffered like, what was that, six straight losses. So, he was out of serious contention by early in the second week. But, he's a guy that we want him to be good so bad. And, he just isn't quite ready for that yet. But next time, surely next time will be his time.
Next time he'll finally win 9.
Oh, and
Instead of
Takeru Fuji. How can we forget his beloved stablemate, the guy that so many of us picked not just to be the best competitor in the lower Maegashira, but win the whole thing because, well, he'd literally done it from that exact spot a few months ago.
Of course, I mean, 10 wins is huge. Just to get 10 wins is fantastic. We were obviously hoping for a little bit more, but also, I mean, he's on his way back from injury. I'm just grateful to have seen him perform almost to the best of his ability, and I'm sure he can take it even further as he continues to rebuild his strength.
I mean, certainly he's going to potentially make Kachi Clash in January interesting because if he stays down in like Maegashira 11, Hakuoho is going to be coming up. So people who remember 2023 fondly, they're going to be very torn between picking between him and Hakuoho in January. So just something to keep in the back of your mind as we await the Bansuke in about 5 or 6 weeks. But 10 wins is certainly nothing to be upset about, and I wouldn't be shocked if he has 11 from the mid Maegashira in the next tournament. So yeah, this is definitely a guy, as long as he can stay healthy, and maybe finally put a little bit of bulk on those tiny, tiny ankles, can really meet his potential. And we can argue that he already has since he did win an entire stinking tournament earlier this year.
Absolutely. And, it's probably also worth noting that the 5 people that he lost to are all people that he's beaten before in a very, very short time up in the division. So it really does feel like we said about Onosato, he's going to be fine. It's really just a matter of time. Next tournament, he'll probably be back to what we expected of him. Nothing to read much into. And then just a few to quickly name. I think it's worth mentioning that Gonoyama had a really great tournament, and Chiyoshoma as well.
Yeah, Chiyoshima, fresh off of a return from the Juryo, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he went 10-5, in Juryo after an injury forced him to fall there, and recovers nicely with an 11-4. So, he'll be back in the middle of the division, which is probably maybe a little bit higher than he's capable of maintaining at this age. I mean, he is in his mid 30s, so I wouldn't be shocked if he's back in like the teens this time in March.
Yeah, and then just a few more to mention. There were a lot of kind of middle of the road records that are almost not particularly noteworthy this time around, but one that's probably a bit of a disappointment, Shishi with a 5-10 record.
I mean, we all want, Shishi's story is just so incredible, him being the first ever Ukrainian, Maegashira wrestler. He was already the first Sekitori from Ukraine. But he won't be alone in Juryo. It's going to be interesting to see him and his countryman Onishiki down in the Juryo ranks, to see them butt heads for the first time, which seems inevitable given his drop and Onishiki's impending rise.
Absolutely. And then I guess there's one thing just worth mentioning. It's the return of Hakuoho.
Yes, the return of the guy who I think it's not far-fetched to say that Hakuoho is maybe the wrestler that really got you into sumo, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, it was certainly really exciting, when he was coming up, but unfortunately, I didn't get to see much of him because right around the time I got into sumo was when he suffered his injury, and after that, we didn't see him for a long time, and it's been slow coming back, obviously.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the slowness of his return is why I guess I'm so concerned for is why I probably should have been more wary of Takeru Fuji, dominating as soon as he got back. Like injuries that cause you to miss a tournament or two are no joke. He like in his first Juryo tournament, just at Juryo 13, when he had been 10-5 a year ago, he comes back to Juryo and he's just 8-7. Then the tournament after that, he gets injured midway through, only wins five. And it's just been a crawl and a slog for him to get back here. Like I don't know if you said it would have taken an entire year for him to get back just to the Makuuchi division, like I think a lot of people would have called you crazy, unless they knew the extent of the injury. That is just how troubling it's been, and I hope it's not something that bugs him for the rest of his career because he is just so polished for someone that is barely old enough to buy a beer here in the United States. That it would just be such a darn shame if his momentum is halted by injuries the way it has for so many others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hoping for him to have a tournament, not unlike Takeru Fuji, coming back strong, solid double-digit wins, and very hopeful for the next one. So we'd love to see something like that from Hakuoho. I think that'd be really special to see them all together in the division. All of the new up-and-comers and some of the slightly more seasoned veterans, although not fully seasoned yet, like Kotozakura and Hoshoryu. And I think those two are probably just a good note to end on. What do you think about the next tournament and what we should be expecting from those two who had such an epic showdown to finish this one off? And then, of course, some of the others that are sneaking into the discussion of who can win the next one.
Well, I will say this. I am, well, I'm not necessarily hoping that it happens, but I'm sort of expecting that Teruno Fuji, assuming his diabetes issues are behind him, I have a sense that he's going to come back in January to try and, maybe see if this can be a sort of passing the torch moment to a worthy Yokozuna successor. So it would sure as hell be nice if we get another strong showing out of him this January, like we got this past one, because that was glorious. Um, but my fear is, as nice as it would be to somehow get a double Yokozuna promotion in a single tournament, I have a strong sense that, because we're not allowed to have nice things in this crazy, kooky world anymore, that neither one of them are going to get their Yokozuna promotion and that both of them will fall, maybe 1 to 3 wins shy of both of them getting a potential Yokozuna rope, unfortunately.
Yeah, it just feels like we've been set up for a lot of disappointment when we've gotten our hopes up about a new Yokozuna for the last while. But I definitely think, with two people, two very strong competitors who feel like they could do it, both on a rope run now, I think it would be really, really special to see Teruno Fuji come back and compete well and just lose to the guy who takes his place as Yokozuna. I think that would be a really fitting end to Teruno Fuji's career and a really great passing of the torch to someone new, whether that's Kotozakura or Hoshoryu. I just agree that, I'm setting myself up for disappointment if I believe that that's what's gonna happen, but it could be very cool.
Teruno Fuji is definitely trying to maybe perfectly manufacture his, the end of his career the way that the great Hakuho was able to 3 years ago, and passing off the Yokozuna torch to him those 3 years ago. Maybe that's what he's aiming for in 2025, but the sumo gods, always have other plans for
Yeah,
us.
of course. And that's probably a good note to finish it off on. Hope everybody has a happy Thanksgiving. You're watching around that period. And we'll be joining you again soon for some more sumo talk in the coming weeks. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Every champion you'll meet, ring the gong, it's time to learn. Sumo tales at every turn. New to Sumo Podcast Fun.